of view, this is a peculiar way in which a co-op was managed. False documentation.
It's a very abnormal way. So abnormal that in the 30 or so years that I've been in ICOS, I cannot remember a similar set of circumstances where decisions of the board were not sought and made in order to authorise this type of activity. It would be very unusual that borrowings of that level would have been undertaken without the board being aware of it, and certainly it's not something that we could condone in any way.
Then in September of 1985, O'Brien and Cotter entered into a bizarre business deal on behalf of Bailieborough. In defiance of all the debts, they entered into a contract to finance the purchase of a timber merchant's business, Thomas Williamson's. This company had gone bust, and it made no sense for the Bailieborough Group to finance the £300,000 purchase. The board knew nothing about this act of folly, and later the contract was rescinded in the High Court when Justice Costello declared the board of directors never considered this transaction and never approved the contracts of guarantee. But Bailieborough lost their deposit, and the co-op was out of pocket to the tune of £100,000.
I don't think Bailieborough was ever really interested in the Williamsons' business as a business to run.
Whether or not they were interested in it, it's clear that the board members were never informed about it.
Oh, that's true. That's very true.
The co-op lost £70,000.
Yes, the co-op could, of course, have lost a good deal more had the court found otherwise. But yes, they lost a substantial sum of money because, I suppose, they, first of all, couldn't conclude the contract under it because they were now in financial difficulties, and secondly, because they went into that contract at all in the beginning without the board being aware of it.
But the most bizarre deal of all involved a crooked American financier called Victor Murgo, with a string of fraud convictions to his credit. Murgo, a loan shark, teamed up with a Swiss Arab bank registered in the British West Indies. O'Brien and Cotter agreed to pay a £100,000 finder's fee to Murgo. In theory, $50 million was to be invested on Bailieborough's behalf, with a guaranteed profit of $3.5 million for the co-op. Needless to say, the £100,000 Bailieborough deposit disappeared, and Bailieborough got nothing back. Did you give any of the managers authority to enter into an arrangement with a bank called the Swiss Arab Bank, based in Madrid?
No, so I never heard of that either.
Did you know, for example, therefore, that £100,000 of Bailieborough's money was prepaid to the Swiss Arab Bank for a deal that was supposed to bring in a substantial sum of money?
No.
In December of 1985, O'Brien finally did approach the board with one proposal, the purchase of Brady Marts, who owned 3 livestock marts with a cash turnover of £20 million a year. The idea behind the deal was to use the cash flow of the marts to help Bailieborough's chronic cash shortages. The board, unaware of the real financial position of the group, agreed to the takeover. But it was too late. Bailieborough couldn't afford to complete the deal and lost nearly £200,000 in the aborted investment.
It could have helped the cooperatives' borrowing requirements, without doubt, if they had the cash flow that comes from running a mart business. They were negotiating right through November, December, and the board was aware of this and gave authority for the deal to be completed. They were not aware that the society had financial difficulties at the same time, though.
Or that money had actually been paid out to Brady's?
No, they were aware of a deposit having been paid, yes. But as I say, that was all in the context of them not being aware that there were financial difficulties looming for the society.
What about the management style then at the co-op?
Yeah, the general manager's track record in developing the society from a very small base to being I think it's about the 8th largest cooperative in the country, certainly gave the board the fullest confidence in his ability to do the job.
But it was when Bailieborough's back. Even in the months before the banks pulled the plug on Bailieborough Co-op, Paddy O'Brien was still planning big developments in which 700 investors lost money. In May 1985, he unveiled plans to build an equestrian centre just outside the town. It was, as Paddy O'Brien said, a very exciting project with enormous potential. The facilities were to include 100 stables, a 20,000 square foot indoor arena, viewing balconies, lounges in a dining area, and a 1,500 seat conference centre. It was an exciting venture, centralised sales and marketing of horses, saving miles of travel for buyers, and bringing big business to Bailieborough. All the co-op shareholders, customers and suppliers were invited to invest in the project. But many investors were seriously misled about the true nature of the horse marketing project. They were led to believe that it was part and parcel of the Bailieborough Co-op group, then still thought to be financially secure. Investors were also led to believe that the government and the EEC had already invested £750,000 in the project. Creditors were cajoled into investing. In August of 1985, O'Brien wrote to companies doing business with Bailieborough Co-op. Your company is one of a very small number which did not reply to our invitation. I assume this was an oversight, or that the invitation went astray in the post. Many suppliers and creditors were left with the clear impression that future business, and in the case of co-op travel, money owed to them, was conditional to some degree on their investing in the horse marketing co-op. Staff too had their arms twisted, further enticed by the offer of an interest-free loan with which to make the investment. In all, 696 investors, 180 of them employees of Bailieborough Co-op, paid over £440,000. The site was bought, building began. Several trips were made to the US by Tom Harvey, the personnel manager at Bailieborough Co-op, and by Kevin McAuliffe, brought in to run the horse marketing centre. These trips were to encourage foreign investment, and trips to Germany to examine other horse marketing ventures. But it turned out all the shareholders' funds were spent before a single shareholders' meeting took place. In February of 1987, a meeting was told that £330,000 was spent on site development and £208,000 on start-up costs. But by then, it was clear that £750,000 in grants were approved by the EEC and the government, but never paid out, and that the horse co-op was not, in fact, part and parcel of Bailieborough Co-op. By then, Bailieborough Co-op itself had collapsed. Workers there discovered that they had not been given interest-free loans. In fact, Bailieborough had been paying the interest for them, and after the fall, the workers were left with their loans and the interest on them. While Paddy O'Brien resigned from Bailieborough Co-op, he maintained his association with the Horse Centre. Despite all efforts, the Horse Centre lies idle and far from finished. The shareholders' money is gone. The small staff have left. There is still some hope that Bailieborough's new owners and the EEC will support the project. For the moment, it's still a dream. Meanwhile, Bailieborough Co-op workers have lost their investment, and many of them have lost their jobs. Still hopeful that the shareholders' money can be saved if the project goes ahead is John Joe Cooney.
There was about 3 people over this before we came in. And when we came into this operation, we found out at our first meeting that all the money that we had raised, which was over £500,000 in shareholder capital, was spent. And when we came into it, there was really nothing there. There was no money left to be spent.
But it was when Bailieborough's back was to the wall that the most unforgivable episode in its tragic recent history took place. In August and November of 1985, 2 invoices from a company calling itself FM Technical Services for £87,000 worth of computer equipment arrived in Bailieborough. Payment was approved by Paddy O'Brien, Chief Executive. The computer equipment was a specialised unit to control the manufacturing process at the milk intake plant. An application was made to the IDA for a grant towards the purchase of this new equipment. The IDA inspectors arrived and couldn't find the equipment when they inspected the plant, and the grant was disallowed. But payment was made to FM Technical Services with an address at 27 Groby Trading Estate, Groby, Leicestershire. Today Tonight organised a search on this company and found the following: not a limited company, cannot trace FM Technical Services, not recorded in local rating authorities, no such address, not known at the GPO. Groby is a small village, Groby has a small trading estate, subject never heard of. Over £80,000 was paid for this equipment out of Bailieborough's bank account to the non-existent FM Technical Services. We have traced one of these payments for £20,000 sterling to the Northern Bank in Armagh in an anonymous account of a southern citizen who gave his address as that of the bank where the cheque was cashed. We've been told by the real suppliers of the named specialised computer equipment that it would be impossible for anyone else to supply the equipment to Bailieborough except them. This wasn't the first attempted fraud on the IDA uncovered by Today Tonight. A few years earlier, Bailieborough presented the IDA with an invoice from OK Welding, based in Belfast, for £37,000 for the supply of a new rotary shear and steam welder. This equipment was in fact second-hand and had been purchased originally in the UK for only £6,500. The grant application was for £12,000. It was refused. The Bailieborough Co-op Group was a major beneficiary of IDA and EEC grants totalling £7 million. But all these payments couldn't save the group. In January of 1986, Bailieborough faced financial ruin. The bankers were called in. 2 confidential reports on the state of the co-op were prepared, the first by National City Brokers, the second by Price Waterhouse. They presented a damning indictment of group financial management. Liam Cotter was fired and Paddy O'Brien resigned on Valentine's Day 1986. He was replaced by Michael Kelly, acting chief executive. Kelly set about preparing audited accounts for 1985. The projected profit of £2 million turned out to be a loss of £4.5 million. Fort Chorrentha, the State Rescue Agency, funded by the taxpayer, committed £3 million in guarantees. And the banks set about finding new owners for the co-op. The now legendary battle between Killashandra and Larry Goodman resulted in a victory for Goodman. Today, Bailieborough is a shadow of its former self. The profitable Emmett's Cream liqueur has been sold off. Owen's Dairies too has been sold. Bailey Engineering is up for sale. Most of the workers have been laid off and the remaining staff are on short time. Cavan Foods, the ill-fated feta cheese plant, has stopped production. The 7 stores are for sale and the core creamery business has lost most of its staff. Employment is almost halved, down from a peak of 650. But more important, there has never been any explanation as to what was behind the milk smuggling and multi-million money laundering operations between Bailieborough executives and West Ulster farmers. Nor too has anyone explained the extraordinary deal in skim milk powder involving Bailieborough executives and Golden Cow, or the fictitious invoices, or the role of haulier Eamon McCardle and the false bank accounts of Alex McEntee. The mysterious dealings of Abervale and its promoters McEntee, Sweeney and McCardle all remain unexplained. What too of the Department of Agriculture? Will they and the EEC ever be told?
Gary Agnew reporting there on the long and winding road which led to the collapse of Bailieborough Co-op. Tomorrow, food and our future. This government says there are thousands of new jobs to be created in food processing, but not before a change in attitude by many Irish farmers and manufacturers. In a special report, we look at the Irish food industry and see why Irish farmers need to get to know the consumer better. And in studio, the chairman of the Heinz Corporation, Dr. Tony O'Reilly. But until tomorrow night, from all of us, good night.